Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Surprise, surprise, another high-profile fight marred by poor scorecards. Joseph Parker getting an extremely wide decision margin on two judges' scorecards, 119-109, 117-111, and the third card, which was more realistic, when I compare it to my card, 115-113. So Joseph Parker beats Junior Fa by unanimous decision. And let's just talk about this judging for a second and then move on to a few other things, because this wasn't a classic sort of fight in the way that it panned out. Arguably, Junior Fa came better than advertised. I expected he would. Joseph Parker's stock probably went down, and we'll come to that and the what next. But first, these cards, absolutely dreadful. 119-109, that's 11 rounds to 1. That does not reflect the sort of fight that I saw and many others that I can tell from social media, because this was quite hard to call. Some people thought that Junior Fa did win. And as I say, there were some tough rounds to score, but, on my card, if I turn them around, it's a couple of rounds either way. It's not 119-109. Junior Fa may as well not have shown up, because the fix was clearly in on that judge's scorecard, because he's either blind or just is incompetent, or a bit of both, because that is dreadful and disgraceful. And it does mar the result and how you feel about this fight. And certainly one of the talking points through the fight was obviously Junior Fa had a lot of success in his game plan, able to frustrate Joseph Parker, and he was able to have success in there as well. There were some very clear Junior Fa rounds, as well as some very clear Joseph Parker rounds. The way these scorecards represent the fight is that it was one-way traffic and Joseph Parker dominated the fight. Not so, and I have seen a number of people say that Junior Fa did win. And Fa actually very classy in defeat in his post-fight interview. He didn't mention those cards at all, the loss. He just said it was an honor to be in there with a world-rated fighter, and he said he loved being part of the event. So, good on Junior Fa for responding in the way that he did. And his stock has definitely gone up. Ahead of this fight, we spoke about his level. Where was it? It wasn't really established. But I think there's parts of it that I think, certainly his stock's gone up, but Joseph Parker's stock has probably gone down as well, because at the end of the day, he needed a performance where he looked good and that he was going to sort of make a few ripples in the heavyweight division, send a message to other divisional rivals. This fight was not it. Often Joseph Parker looked a little bit laboured, tired and predictable. He looked like he was starting to run out of steam after about 6 or 7 rounds in what was a relatively low volume fight. And sure, in his post-fight interview he spoke about a little bit of ring rust, etc. But this was more than that. It wasn't a good performance. And even though some of those cards suggest otherwise, very close fight in which he might be thinking that he's lucky that he got the win here. His corner after the fight, Kevin Barry, was saying, look, that was a very close fight, very honest about that. But Parker at times just didn't really seem to fire. He became very predictable with the sort of jab, right hand coming in. And although the fight was probably personified by the holding, this was a tactic by Junior Fa that he was able to implement very successfully. But Joseph Parker was unable to really sort of prevent that happening. There seemed to be no plan B. It was all the same round after round after round. Junior Fa was getting a beat on what Joseph Parker was going to do. There was some certainly telegraphed shots, and he was able to see a lot of what was coming. There was not a lot of variation. He looked a bit predictable and just didn't really seem to be able to mix things up. So I think from the standpoint for his stock in the heavyweight division, arguably it went down, not up. And he was obviously looking for a good performance. He wanted a stoppage. He said he was going to stop Junior Fa inside 6 rounds. Didn't happen. And in the sort of the fight itself, he only had flashes of success. There were no real sustained periods where he was dominating Junior Fa. Sure, there was moments of success, but nothing sustained that you sort of thought he's really racked up 4 solid rounds where he's dominated and controlling the action outright. wasn't that sort of fight. There was a lot of ebb and flow in this, and it was very disjointed at times because of the holding. And at points in the fight, I was thinking Lawrence Okoli must have taught Junior Fa how to hold here, because he's putting on a masterclass, of Okoli proportions. But I guess that is some of the benefit of the gym that he trains in, City Kickboxing, which has obviously links to UFC champions and fighters, etc. They do have good holding and grappling techniques, etc. And you could sort of see that he was able to control Joseph Parker, and Parker was getting frustrated, but he just didn't know what to do about it. And it was a clear tactic to any time Joseph Parker came in, tie up. And I guess part of that is because he didn't want to mix it on the inside with Parker, but also it seemed to be that Junior Fa just doesn't really have an inside game. And I've been on record before saying that Joseph Parker's inside game is not strong, but Junior Fa's inside game is non-existent. But he was able to fight his fight to the tempo that he wanted to. This is Junior Fa. He was able to tie up, he was able to jab, he was actually connecting on some decent right hands at times, and he had some success when he was feinting and then throw a left, but it was one of these fights where sometimes a couple of punches were swinging around, and this is why some of them were so hard to call. Even late in the fight, I mean, round 12, they're very messy, not a lot to sort of, write home about. Round 9 was another, very hard to call. But certainly Junior Fa was able to shore up some of his deficiencies that we have seen before, including being susceptible to the left hook. I can only remember 2 or 3 times where Parker sort of landed that punch, but to no real sort of extent. But it became a bit of a round after round. It was all the same and very scrappy, messy, and I know sometimes a frustrating fight to watch, but very intriguing. And I tweeted after the fight, look, this, some hard to call rounds there. These cards are going to be interesting, but not 119, 109 interesting. That is absolutely disgraceful. So arguably, Parker's stock didn't really go anywhere. If anything, it went down. And Junior Fa, because no one really knew him ahead of this fight. I mean, sure, hardcore boxing fans, but a lot of people hadn't seen much of him. He hadn't fought at any real level. And now he's fought a guy that he went 12 rounds with, and actually at times did okay. And he had moments of success himself. And I'm not trying to make an argument that he dominated Joseph Parker, because he didn't. It was a close fight. It was hotly contested in certain rounds, and obviously some very hard to call rounds. But his stock went up. And I think he can get some fights, and he will be seen as a guy that's got good skills. He's, 6'5", 6'6". He's got a good reach. 82 inches. So he can be, I think, in some good level fights where he can earn a good payday. Probably not as much as the sort of guaranteed $500,000 that he's getting from this fight, but there is avenues for Junior Fa going forward based on this performance. His stock went up. People will know his name now, and that will probably open a few doors in the heavyweight division. For Joseph Parker, the stock probably didn't really go up. It probably went down, and they're talking about potentially a fight with Derek Chisora, and based off that performance, which at times was not great, I think that's probably a little bit closer of a fight than I've previously been thinking about that fight. The stamina wasn't great, and he was entirely predictable for large stretches. And Derek Chisora, he's a guy that's there or thereabouts around top 20. He's basically lost to most of the best fighters in the world. That he's fought a lot of top guys, and credit to him for taking those fights. But Joseph Parker, competitive fight with Derek Chisora, if they do make that, I would still pick Parker. I think he can outbox Derek Chisora, but there could be some very tough rounds if they make that fight, especially early on when Chisora is fresh. We saw what Chisora could do against Dillian Whyte in 2 fights. Had a lot of success in both of those fights. Ultimately, he was stopped in that second fight. But Joseph Parker's lack of power and the ability to land the right hand in this fight against Junior Fa just wasn't there. He likes that big looping overhand right. Wasn't really able to land it at all. They were able to plan for that punch, the movement of Junior Fa, the defense, and I think on the defensive end, I was very impressed with Junior Fa compared to some other fights. He's been hurt, he's been down before against much lesser opposition. So they've put a really good performance in here, and ultimately it's probably made Joseph Parker and his night look a little bit average, despite the wide scorecards. But what did you make of this fight? I mean, do you want to see this Derek Chisora fight next? I mean, ahead of the fight, actually, David Higgins, he was on the broadcast saying that if Joseph Parker beats Junior Fa, he's probably getting a title shot at the end of 2021. And obviously we know that's just absolute fantasy. Higgins, he's Eddie Hearn, whoever Joseph Parker ends up going with, depending when the fight happens, because his contract with Matchroom only has one more fight. This fight was actually outside of his Matchroom DAZN deal, although that they did license the fight back to DAZN, which is a very cynical move to obviously rort the local market of New Zealand and Australia on pay-per-view. But I digress. But Higgins, fantasy talk that there's a title fight at the end of the year. Because obviously we know that the champions are tied up, and they could be tied up for some time if they do fight each other for Undisputed. And even then, they're not voluntarily going to give Joseph Parker a shot. He's not in position. So Joseph Parker will just sort of shore up his ranking in the WBO, and it does feel that there is a lack of ambition about really wanting to fight a top guy. No disrespect to Derek Chisora, but he's a gatekeeper for the top level. He's not the top level. And there seems to be a real lack of wanting to actually go above that. They seem to be wedded to that fight, and they seem to want to eke Joseph Parker back to a title shot. I actually would rather much prefer to see him in with a better operator, someone in a top 10, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that. I don't mind the Chisora and Parker fight should they make that, and that was a fight they were going to have in 2019, and as we know, Parker got a spider bite and pulled out. But I think, if he really does have ambition to be the best, he should actually be fighting some of the best. And I think it's going to be better preparation for him fighting a better operator. And I think people will go, okay, off the back of if he beat a top 10 guy, for example, I think people could go, yeah, he deserves a title shot. If he beats Chisora, does he deserve a title shot? Maybe not. So there is, obviously, as Parker said in the post-fight interview, things to work on. So, and I know the debate is going to start again. What should Joseph Parker do? Should he leave Kevin Barry? Some people are going to say, look, when was the last time we really had a great performance from Joseph Parker? Has he leveled out with Barry? Is it time for a change? These are the sort of questions that are going to be asked, have been asked before, and no doubt are going to be asked again. So what do you make of that? Is it time for him to actually move to a new trainer? Did you actually like what you saw in there from Joseph Parker tonight? I thought I thought he looked one-dimensional at times, unable to adapt, and, he should have been trying different things as opposed to the same time and time again, round after round. So what did you make of the performance by Joseph Parker? What did you make of the performance by Junior Fa? Does his stock go up? Does Parker's go up, or does it go down? Drop a comment loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.